Hello, welcome to episode 3 of the Epic Film Challenge 2.5. 100 movies you really must see before you die. Once again, third time unlucky, I filmed an entire review for this film and it wasn't in the book. In fact, I was going to have the Blu-ray up here to kind of display as I did the video, but I took it down because I've already done a review for this film and it is The Hidden Fortress, Akira Kurosawa's classic adventure action film from 1958. So let's just pop that up there for the rest of the video. Make sure it doesn't fall down. I just assumed it was in the book. I really did. And I could have sworn that I saw it written down in the book, 1,000 More Movies You Must See Before You Die. But I filmed the video. I mean, I really went all in on this. I watched the film again. I watched it again with the commentary. I watched the making of documentary. I really did my kind of homework on this. I filmed the video, didn't edit it thankfully, and yeah, it wasn't in the book. So I decided instead of showing you my original review, I would do it all over again just for this series, and also as part of Asian Cinema Season 2017 on my channel, to kick things off with the Kurosawa reviews, because this is a film that I feel should be in that book, and should be hailed as a classic that you should see before you die. Now, to get into my experience with Kurosawa, which I've talked about before, but for the purposes of this video, I really credit Kurosawa with my entire movie watching, well, most of it. You know, obviously there's the blockbusters that I'm always going to go and watch, but the rabbit hole I've gone down over the past 6 years of my life is attributed to Akira Kurosawa, Seven Samurai. Deciding to branch out a bit and watch this 3.5-hour long Japanese film and discovering that, you know, this old black and white, square-framed, subtitled movie was the best thing I'd ever seen. And that maybe I should give these foreign films a try. Maybe I should give different films a try. Films I'd never heard of before, films that I didn't think I'd enjoy. Obviously I thought I was going to enjoy a film about samurai, but the push that I got from that was so monumental that Seven Samurai was a life-changing film for me. And from there I went on, I watched Yojimbo, Sanjuro, Throne of Blood, Hidden Fortress. Didn't like Hidden Fortress very much. Well, I liked it, but I didn't love it, I should say. I didn't love it as much as the other Kurosawa films. I thought it was a bit too slow, it dragged on a bit too long, but I enjoyed it for what it was. You know, at this point in his career, Kurosawa making Hidden Fortress, he'd had quite a ride. He was working as an assistant director, I believe, in the 30s, or at least the early 40s. In 1944, I believe, he made his first film, Sanshiro Sugata, and started making films around the time of World War II ending. And, you know, he made some good films. None of them were really great, in my opinion, except for maybe The Man Who Tread on the Tiger's Tail. I think that really shows a lot of his promise. I think all of his films show flashes of his brilliance, but not quite the full package until he got to Rashomon in 1950, and that was his first kind of certifiable masterpiece. And from there, you know, he really made a name for himself and just was rattling out these incredible films. Ikiru, Seven Samurai, Throne of Blood, like just holy shit, what a run of films he had in the 50s. And by 1958, he wanted to make something that was more of a crowd pleaser. He wanted to move away from doing an art film and doing something that was action-oriented, adventure-oriented, and something that would just really entertain people. And one of the great quotes from the man himself is that a really good movie should be an enjoyable movie. And I'm paraphrasing there, but you know, it should be easy to understand and enjoyable. And that's what he sought to do with The Hidden Fortress. I think he pulled it off tremendously. Watching it again for, I guess, this video now, I loved it. I really appreciated it on a whole other level. You know, 6 years ago, I wasn't as interested in the technique of making films. Now I am, and I know what to look for. Some of the things to look for, I should say. I'm by no means an expert. And just the way that this is made technically is just incredible. That alone, I feel like, should warrant it a place in the book. And again, I'm looking at like the director index in the back of that book, and it's like, you know, Akira Kurosawa has, I think, 7 films in the 1,001 Movies book. Stanley Kubrick has 9. That seems about fair. Alfred Hitchcock has 19. I mean, come on, Hitchcock is great. Do we really need to be placing Sabotage, which is great, or Marnie, which is very good, above something like The Hidden Fortress? I don't think so. It is what it is, and apparently Hidden Fortress has never appeared in any of the editions of the 1001 Movies book, just like the previous 2 videos in this series, The Great Dictator and Safety Last. And I think there's something a bit weird and wrong about that. But let's talk about the film. It's set in the kind of samurai era. I don't know the specific timelines, but hundreds of years back. It's about these 2 clans that have fought, and one of them has been defeated. And so the enemy clan is now kind of taken over and the good guy clan has been disbanded, and all that remains of that clan, I forget the exact name of it, is the Princess Yuki, and she has her general, Makabe Rokuruta, played by the incredible Toshiro Mifune. Obviously, you know, if you're familiar with Kurosawa, you're probably familiar with Mifune. He was Kurosawa's muse in a lot of ways. They made, I think, 16 films together. Very much a, you know, Scorsese, De Niro type relationship. They both just made each other's films so much better and had an incredible collaboration over the years. And, you know, it was no surprise to see him in this film, of course, but he just brings it. Like, he brings it in every role. The physical presence and charisma that Toshiro Mifune is able to exude out of his characters was perfect for this role as General Rokuruta, this samurai, this protector, this general who was serving Princess Yuki. And the goal of the film, of the story, is to kind of rebuild their clan. They have some gold that's hidden near the hidden fortress where they're hiding out in exile. And they plan to take this hidden gold back across the enemy border, back to where their clan was, and to rebuild everything from square one. And that's the plot of the film. So the hidden fortress is really this base of operations for the first half of the film, but really it's more of a road movie away from the hidden fortress. And the original title was Three Bad Men in a Hidden Fortress, which actually links to a John Ford film called Three Bad Men. And Kurosawa was a big admirer of John Ford and became a good friend of his in later years too. There's a story, in fact, where he was making a film and John Ford passed away while he was making it, and his crew knew how much Kurosawa loved John Ford, that they didn't tell him that he passed away until they'd finished filming, out of kind of, I guess, respect, and also to not kind of distract him from the film. And he was a big fan of John Ford and learned a lot from him. The Western sensibility of making films is something that Kurosawa definitely brought over to his style of filmmaking. A lot of people in Japan criticized him for that, thought that his style of making films in Japan was too Western. You know, just the tricks that he picked up, and he asked John Ford, you know, what's the trick to filming horses on screen and so on. And so he learned a lot from John Ford, both from watching his films and becoming a friend of his later on in life. And little details like always making sure if you're filming a landscape shot not to have the horizon in the center of the shot, but just above or just below, which you can kind of, you know, work in the rule of thirds and so on. It's a fairly simple thing to think about, but back then that's something that you know, he very much took from John Ford, and again was a big admirer of his work and sought to bring that into his own movies. So The Hidden Fortress, yeah, it's an interesting one because a lot of people talk about this as being the original Star Wars. This is where Star Wars was born. And so I think a lot of people go to The Hidden Fortress expecting the original Star Wars and see George Lucas's 1977 magnum opus as a remake of Hidden Fortress, and it couldn't be further from the truth in my opinion. We have the two peasant characters, these lowly characters who are, as far as the main characters go in the film, the lowest people on the food chain, and the story is told through their perspective. We open the film with them wandering through these flats, and they're just two peasants just trying to get whatever they can. They're scrounging, basically. They'll stab anyone in the back to get what they want, to survive, including each other. And they have a very fun relationship that is explored throughout the film, where they're constantly bickering with each other, constantly making up, and then constantly falling out again. And over the course of their adventures, with the big falling out of these two clans and the wars that have been waged, they end up in a valley. And that's where they first meet General Rokuruta, in a great scene where he kind of emerges from the darkness. The lighting in that scene is incredible. And he explains to them what's going on, and he takes them to the hidden fortress. But he doesn't quite reveal everything just yet, and makes them work in a way of kind of proving their worth as people who could be useful to him on his mission to transport Princess Yuki across the border, which they end up doing. They end up helping out, and they transport the gold encased inside sticks and put on the backs of a few horses. So I love that idea of these guys trying to get past, you know, the enemy lines with all their gold in plain sight, hidden on the back of the horses inside this wood. I think it's a really cool idea, and it constantly keeps you on edge as to what's going to happen with the gold, and when the enemy turns up, are they going to notice? Are they going to, you know, stop them? All that kind of stuff. The tension is quite good when they're actually getting close to enemy territory and moving through places where they're not welcome, but they're trying to kind of slink in and kind of blend in with the background and everything. And Princess Yuki is an incredible character. This is a fairly new actress, an unknown at the time, and she's fantastic as Princess Yuki. She really displays the strong, authoritative presence of royalty, and she just has a real take no shit attitude. Is a real strong female character, you know, especially in Japan at that time. Female character was either a femme fatale or a damsel in distress. You know, there was not much of a middle ground, and so she was certainly breaking new ground, I think, in Japanese films at the time, being a real strong female character who wasn't just a hard ass. She had emotions too, and there's a great scene where we see her crying over her lost clan in a fantastic sequence where she's overlooking the valley and so on, and the cinematography really adds to that, but also her performance when she's crying, and the fact that she does that alone so that she doesn't have to show her perceived weaknesses to anyone else, and that again shows you the seriousness that she treats her position of power in the clan. Even though the clan is pretty much gone, she still treats it seriously, and the plan is to transport her across the enemy lines, and she's going to pretend to be a mute, basically, so she can't speak. And so she assumes that role. And this is actually a part where George Lucas took something and put it into The Phantom Menace, when we see Qui-Gon Jinn take Amidala, unbeknownst to him, into Mos Espa. And she gets to see kind of a whole different world, which is what Princess Yuki sees. She gets to see on this trip, on this journey, this road trip, to see the lower classes, and she gets a completely different perspective on the plight of the lower classes and so on, and that just adds to her empathy for people. And she has that right from the beginning, because the initial plan is that they're going to take someone else, and a lot of times in these stories from these times they would have, you know, a double who would stand in for a king or a queen or a prince and be sacrificed, basically, with the idea that, you know, the public would think that that person was now dead, and the real prince or king or queen would then operate, you know, secretly. And she balks at this idea. She doesn't want anyone sacrificing their lives for her. She's going to take control of her own destiny. And so I love that aspect to her character, and the way that her and Rokuruta bounce off each other is really cool and fun and tense at times. And I love how that relationship grows across the film. And also Rokuruta, who is this very kind of traditional samurai, very stern, but he's got a sense of humor too, right from the beginning. You know, you really see he has a playful nature to him when he first meets the two peasants, but throughout the film we see him change a little bit as well, and the influence of Yuki on him is really pronounced. There's a great sequence where he has a duel with an old rival of his, and when he meets him, you know, the atmosphere between them is very jovial. You know, they're going to have this duel and see who the better man is, but soon the jovial nature kind of is wiped off the warrior's face as he realizes he's really being faced with a formidable foe here. And it's a great duel that really takes its time. Like, it'd be hard to get away with this now. It really draws itself out, and the silence, you know, there's great music in the film, but here it drops out, and we just see them kind of very slowly circling each other, and they go through different parts of this small encampment and stuff, and he eventually defeats the warrior, and instead of doing the honorable thing, which is to kill him, because he's been disgraced in front of his group, Rokuruta decides to leave him, which is almost a worse fate, you know, to kind of be left with that embarrassment. And the character arc of that warrior who he beats, who's also played by the actor who played Sanshiro Sugata in Kurosawa's very first film, the judo expert. I didn't know that, and so seeing it this time around, it made it even more enjoyable to me as a Kurosawa fan, because I really like him in those first two films Kurosawa made, and he was in a few of his other early films too. And he's a great actor, and he really, his character arc is really important to the end of the film. And I really like that, because again, you see Rokuruta deciding not to do the traditional thing, and to maybe have mercy. And again, you can see where his relationship with Princess Yuki is rubbing off on him and changing him in some ways, perhaps for the better. So you have characters that do have these arcs, whereas the peasants perhaps are always on that same level of always trying to get something out of it for themselves. Even to the point where there's a scene where it insinuates that they might rape Princess Yuki, which is a bit uncomfortable, but they're sitting there and she's kind of lying there, and her arm is bare, and they're getting a bit antsy about it, and they draw straws as to who's going to go first, which is, yeah, I guess that plays into the original title, Three Bad Men and the Hidden Fortress, because those two peasants are perceived in some way to be bad men, as is Rokuruta, but I don't think they're black and white bad guys, but there are shades of grey with the characters, whereas I think Princess Yuki is kind of that shining protagonist for the whole film. The cinematography is just incredible. You know, it's one of those films that doesn't try too hard to have great shots all the time, but when you have those great shots, they serve the story, they serve the scene. Something Kurosawa is incredible at doing is moving the camera. in a way that really serves the motion and action of the scene, or not moving the camera and having the characters placed in certain ways and having them move around the frame in certain ways that makes things interesting. You know, he doesn't cut very much, but when he does, it's really impactful. Like the horse chase scene, which is unbelievable when Rokuruta is chasing some bad guys across this field path, and the camera's following him, it's following the horses, and we're quickly cutting back and forth, and there's this amazing handful of shots where Toshiro Mifune is riding this horse, no-handed, with his sword, just perfect pose like that, just charging forward, and the way they captured it is incredible. And on the making of documentary, one of the cameramen talks about how what they did was, because Kurosawa didn't like zooming at all, instead of zooming out as they followed him getting closer to the camera as the horse and Mifune passes in front of the camera, they would dolly backwards as they did it to kind of keep that kind of the focus, but also to keep the depth and everything, and it gives a real weird effect. I always thought, watching that scene, that it felt like he was almost held by like a rod, because he's so kind of steady. But it's the way that they filmed it, and it's just weird, really weird effect, but it's just one of my favourite moments of the film, and it's such an exciting action sequence. And Mifune had a double that was going to do this shot, and he said, nah, I'll do this. And so, you know, he just, awesome, just careening down this path, no-handed, holding this sword in perfect warrior position. I think Toshiro Mifune was born to play a samurai, and is just, will always be the absolute, you know, granddaddy of them all when it comes to portraying a samurai on screen. No one will ever touch him, I think. He has that down absolutely to a genre of itself. He is the samurai of movie history, in my opinion. He's just so great. He has that just believability to him, that raw kind of power that he, again, exudes, to reuse that word. As I said, the cinematography, it really works. There's a great scene where the peasants are digging a ditch per the instructions of Rokuruta, and they're bickering back and forth, and the camera's inside the ditch. They get out of the ditch, and then they walk around opposite sides of it, and the camera comes back still inside the ditch, and the camera tilts up, and it's just this incredible shot where you have these two characters on either side of the frame, and in the background you have these mountains and the area around the hidden fortress, these kind of raggedy, kind of tooth-like mountains. They just look so weird and interesting and cool and appropriate for the setting, as otherworldly in a lot of ways. But that shot, you see these two characters bickering, and they're literally being divided by this ditch. It shows you what's going on between the two characters as they're bickering. And just, it's an interesting way to do it. You could have just had the two characters just in one shot, just arguing for a minute. But Kurosawa has them moving, walking around, and showing the divide between the two through the cinematography. Just great stuff. And also, I haven't even mentioned this yet, this was Kurosawa's first widescreen film. Now you look at his earlier films like Rashomon, Throne of Blood, Seven Samurai in particular, and you just look at the cinematography and it's just stunning. You know, the people he worked with to achieve his visual vision for his films just works so well. You know, you look at some of those films, even though they're in the square frame, 1:35:1, whatever it is, you know, he really milks the most out of those aspect ratios. 1958, you know, 50s, 60s, TV was becoming a big thing, and so widescreen was looked at as a new format to differentiate movies from television, and to keep people coming back to the cinema, because you couldn't get widescreen on TV at that time. And so Kurosawa decided to delve into the world of widescreen filmmaking, and it's just incredible. The results are amazing. It's like, you know, you take someone who did so much with this, and then you give him this, and it blows open the world of his cinematic flair, I think, in the landscape shots, but also just the more intimate shots, you know, where you've got 4 different characters in the same shot, in this wide frame. It doesn't feel, you know, compacted. It doesn't feel like it's been unnaturally, you know, squished in to kind of get everyone in frame. It feels natural. They're placed out. And you can look at all the different characters' reactions to this one, you know, speech that's being given by a particular character. And I'm thinking of a scene in particular, but, you know, there's lots of ways where the widescreen image really helps the story and makes everything that Kurosawa does with the camera even better, in my opinion. And he would go on to do more great things with the widescreen format, though I've not seen many of his widescreen films, it has to be said. I think, obviously, Yojimbo and Sanjuro, and I think High and Low was widescreen. And then Ran, which again is another film that just, you know, it just opens up everything. I love seeing this first widescreen film from Kurosawa, and I think it might be, so far anyway, what the best directed film of his that I've seen. There are films that he's done that have incredible imagery, but just the way that everything is framed, the composition in Hidden Fortress is just so incredible. Like shot to shot, you can break it down and really look at how just perfect it's been put together. I think it's so impressive. But ultimately, you know, all that stuff is interesting to me, but is the story good? And I think it is. I think it's a fun action adventure. There's great scenes, memorable moments, there's great music, just a fantastic film all across the board. And there's probably many other things I could go into. In fact, I kept some notes, so I'll just look through my notes now to see if there's anything else that I could touch on before I round off this video. Yeah, I seem to have basically touched on everything. The character of Princess Yuki and how great she really is. I mean, you want to look at a real good, strong female character that isn't just a caricature. You look at Princess Yuki, and I love the way that her makeup was designed and Rokuruta's makeup was designed based on no masks from you know, theater and stuff from Japan. That kind of traditional influence is brought in as well. And another thing, the sets are great. There's a fantastic sequence where just after one of the battles, there's hundreds of people pouring down this huge staircase, and in the behind the scenes pictures you see that this staircase is like literally just fabricated and held up by poles. But when you see it on screen, there's hundreds of people just stomping down it and it doesn't move. It's solid as a rock. So the production design was incredible here. The sets, when used, were great, and then the location shooting is just wonderful. There's another great sequence where the peasants are on this mountaintop and there's fog everywhere and it just looks amazing. And I remember watching it thinking, man, they must have got a lot of smoke machines for this. But no, it was real fog. They used it. They waited for a gap, and obviously it was arduous to kind of sit there and wait for this perfect moment, but they did it, and you get those great results. Another thing I wanted to mention, I didn't really delve into it, I kind of touched on it and then jumped off into another tangent, was the Star Wars thing. I mean, you even have George Lucas on the Blu-ray talking about how influential this film was to him, and the idea of taking these two low characters and telling the film through their perspective, which of course would be R2-D2 and C-3PO. I still don't think that there's that comparison, but it's not like the characters are the same. The relationship is the same, these two people who are bickering and stuff, but also how they get carried off on this grand adventure. That is very much a part of what George Lucas did with those droids in Star Wars, but you know, there's similar things. There's similar elements, but really it's just a bare skeleton of a resemblance to me. And, you know, George Lucas was a guy who was so smart that he pulled from so many different areas that to me, there is no real original Star Wars. You know, there's elements, but I think that the importance placed on Hidden Fortress to, you know, the inspiration for Star Wars, I think is vastly overstated. But it gets people watching it, so that's a good thing as well. But yeah, I love this film. I love the performances, and Mifune, again, I can't express how much I love watching him in films. He's just such a tower of strength on screen, and he's great in this film. So yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. The Hidden Fortress looks fantastic. I really appreciated it so much more this time around. I will say, still dragged a little bit. And there's some scenes that go on a bit too long when they're crawling up that kind of rock mountainside when they get into the Hidden Fortress at the beginning. Really takes its time, almost excruciatingly. But it's a film that drags, goes on a bit too long, but I can't look at anything and say that shouldn't be there. It all feels necessary. It all feels like it's there by design, and so for that, you know, I can't say that it should be cut down or anything, but I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't a little bit restless at some points in the film where it drags on. But it's not many. You know, once they get on the road, it really gets interesting and really entertaining. And that's another thing. It's one of his most entertaining films. You look at you know, Seven Samurai, Throne of Blood. Some of his more, well, I guess Seven Samurai is quite entertaining actually in a lot of ways, but some of his more serious films, Akira, for example, Throne of Blood, you know, there's a serious tone to them that you know, is not the most entertaining. You can appreciate it and you can get something deep out of it, but it's not an entertaining film. But this one's a real thrill ride. I loved it. It's fantastic, and I can't wait to watch it again and again, and hopefully those like niggles I have about the way it drags on a bit will fade away as I appreciate even more of the great cinematography and technique that I hadn't spotted the first time. There's another scene that I'm looking forward to watching again, which is the very beginning when the peasants are bickering on, you know, just out in the open, and this dying warrior kind of just lurches into screen and is just about to, you know, collapse dead. And these riders come in on horses and stab him with a spear, and he falls down and he's lying in a death kind of frozen position like that, just really kind of over the top and everything. And one of the horses comes back and kicks him in the head. I'd never noticed this before, and in the documentary there's a great interview with the guy who played that character. He says he came in and he was ready to do the film. and was told he was going to get stabbed and stuff, and so they put this board underneath his costume, and the spears were retractable, so it was all safe. But he said it still felt like hell when he got when he got stabbed with them. So they did it all in one take, and he's like, oh, thank God for that. And then he said, right, now we're going to do the close-up, so he had to do it again. But when he was lying on the ground like this, he was told that he'd be safe, but one of the horses came back and stomped on his head. He said he heard this big clang, and what had happened was, because a lot of the characters in films of this era have that kind of the bald skullet and the hair on the sides, but completely shaved on the top. And obviously the actors don't actually have their head shaved, they have these kind of skull caps put on. And he said that back in those days it was made out of bronze, and later on they'd use a kind of a less sturdy material for it. But if it wasn't for that bronze, he said, you probably wouldn't be speaking to me today, because that horse just absolutely trod on his head. And when you see the clip, it is shocking. And when they'd finished, Kurosawa said, right, get his clothes off. So they stripped his costume off, and all of these medallions and kind of lucky charms he was wearing, talismans, all fell off. And he was so embarrassed because he just put them on just for luck, basically. And how spooky is that he put all these lucky charms on underneath his costume. In that scene you see in the film, and he got stomped on the head by a horse and survived. I thought that's just a really crazy story. Another good story from the making of documentary, just in case you love the film and you haven't got a Region A player and you can't have access to the documentary on the Blu-ray from the Criterion edition. One of the guys who was working on the film was talking about how Toshiro Mifune was a great guy and had a bit of a bad reputation for being a bit of a dick, but he said that to me he was always great, and when he drank he was a completely different person. But you know, he was such a stand-up guy, and he went out drinking with him once and came back to Mifune's house, and he went to sleep. And he woke up in the morning with a bird chirping on the windowsill, and he said that was Mifune put that bird there to wake me up instead of coming in and saying anything. Just a really cool idea. And also he found a brand new set of clothes waiting for him. So he put them on, and he said, "Why would you give me these new clothes?" And Mifune said, "Well, you can't turn up today with the same clothes on that you had yesterday. It'll give a bad image. So I've had your clothes taken off to be washed, and you'll have them back in a few days." You know, so really great story of Mifune's kind of great hospitality. And then there are those stories of him being a heavy drinker and so on, and he has flaws. But I thought that was a really nice, sweet story. And Kurosawa, just one of the all-time greats. And I think this is one of his best films, just as far as the direction and everything. But it's a real fun, refreshing change of pace from a lot of his more serious films as well, like maybe Drunken Angel or Akira, which are both fantastic, but they're very serious movies, and there's not much fun to be had in them. This one, it really takes that kind of fun element of the samurai stories that he tells, and wraps it all up in this one big, incredibly entertaining film. And one more thing, I guess, is that to say that this film drags a little bit, it's about 2 hours and a half, I think, whereas Seven Samurai is 3 hours and a half, and I never for a second in Seven Samurai feel like it's dragging. So there must be a way to do it, and so I feel like there's a few chinks in the armor of The Hidden Fortress, but overall, I love it, and I've waffled on about it for far too long, so I'll leave it there. This was my mission statement, I suppose. This is a film you should see before you die, no matter what that book decides to say as far as Kurosawa's films are concerned, and that this one isn't worthy of inclusion. I'm sure that wasn't the case, and it was specifically seen as, right, Hidden Fortress can't be in the book, but you know, you put in most of his other great films, I think this one deserves to be there amongst the other ones. So, there we go. Thank you for watching. Leave your thoughts down below if you have any on The Hidden Fortress. And I'll see you in the next video throughout this Asian cinema season. This will be my first Kurosawa video, and certainly not the last. So, you can look forward to some more Kurosawa reviews over the next month. So, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.